Go ahead, Ryan. Continue what your thought was before.
Well, like I was saying, that there's two sides to every story, and I think that a large part of the problem is that some sides are just basically refusing to see any other side other than their own. And eventually, what's going to end up happening is you're going to polarize to the extent where there's just two extremes, and there's no more moderates. Now, right now, I think there are enough moderates that there's still a chance that things can happen, but at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the moderate people to make these kinds of solutions, because the people that are extreme, and I mean, we're seeing some of it even in the chat here, people that are extreme have absolutely no interest in peace.
Right. So, I mean, Ryan, an interesting point that I would throw out there is like, for example, well, Rashid, do you hear us by any chance, or can you speak? I want to see if we hear you. Anyone hear Rashid or no? Still no.
I can't hear
just hear anything.
You hear Bree?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I was going to ask. Ryan, interesting point that I would throw out there. You've spoken to Kyle before in the past, or at least have seen him around wherever in different forums. Do you personally think that after hearing what his suggestions are from today, that his views are necessarily extreme, or rather he's bringing up points that, some of them which have factual evidence to support them, maybe some of them don't, whatever it might be? Do you think that, his beliefs are extreme after now actually listening to him?
Yeah, see, here's the thing with Kyle, and I've always said this. I've known Kyle for a while. We met actually on a political chat board. Kyle's not a bad kid. I think just sometimes Kyle goes along a little bit too much with propaganda, and some of his views and beliefs I tend to find a little bit extreme. But at the end of the day, he does get involved, and I mean, really, he's got no stake in it. So I mean, you have to be impressed by the fact that he's at least willing to get involved, even if I don't agree with what he has to say.
Right. And I mean, Kyle, ultimately, you hear the points that Ryan makes. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people, that on your end of the spectrum that would, would put his thought process and his points of view in, the right wing Zionist, part of the spectrum. Is that, something that you necessarily would still think after now hearing his points laid out, verbally and them going back and forth, or not necessarily? Maybe there is some sort of, middle ground to be presented here.
Well, of course, there's a middle ground. There's always middle ground in just about every conflict and every situation where there are two opposing viewpoints. But the difference is, I think Ryan is well intentioned, but he's gotten, like he said, he thinks I've fallen victim to too much propaganda. I would argue the same thing.
I figured.
Barry Goldwater once said that I would remind you that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. So, if I'm being called extreme in my pursuit of justice for the Palestinians, I take that as a badge of honor rather than as a demerit, because the Palestinian people, they don't have international representatives competent and capable of doing what they need to do. Mahmoud Abbas is not a great leader. He's not bad, he's not a bad guy, but I just don't think he's getting the job done.
I would argue he is a bad guy, but I agree he's not getting the job done.
I would
the Palestinians
say the same thing about the leaders of Hamas and the various other parts as well, the PFLP and various others. So the Palestinians aren't getting good leadership, and that's not their own fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It's just the way things are, and I think it falls upon it's upon the rest of us, those of us with the conscience and those of us with the integrity to do the right thing, to try to arbitrate and seek justice and a fair settlement to the conflict, wherever and however we can do so. And for a lot of Israelis and Israeli people and their supporters, it's going to involve a little bit of pain. There's no way around it. It's not going to be a 100% amicable split. It's not going to be painless, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a very difficult transition, but sacrifices have got to be made on both sides, and the Palestinians have already sacrificed so much.
Go ahead,
I
Ryan.
absolutely agree, but I absolutely agree with your assertion that there will have to be sacrifices on both sides, Kyle. The problem is, and this is, again, this goes back to the way the real world operates, and, like you're fond of saying, facts on the ground. When Israel was not in a position of, shall we say, power, when Israel was actually in a position where it needed to be very, very careful, pretty much politically, militarily, the whole 9 yards, Israel was more willing to compromise and more willing to give up more. Now you have to understand that now that Israel's in a position of dominance, they're not interested in giving up everything. Now they've already said they're willing to compromise, but it's basically like asking the United States to compromise with my people. The United States is not going to say, hey, we're going to give you guys enough of that. It's not going to happen. So realistically, if you're the negotiator on the side of the Palestinians, you have to negotiate realistically, which means you have to acknowledge the fact that you're not in dominance.
Well, let's talk about that item, negotiating realistically. What is it, Kyle, on your end? What is it? What are the terms that you think regard negotiating realistically? And then Ryan, you can go ahead and say the same for the side that you represent.
Well, I think realistically is a matter of subjective opinion, but
definitely
I think all we really need to do is uphold the letter of as it is today, and prevent the Israelis from denying the rights that are undeniable and inalienable to all people. The UN has already resolved. The UN was powerful enough and legitimate enough to recognize the state of Israel and give it its legitimacy. That means, logically, that it's legitimate and powerful enough to arbitrate the conflict, and they have already done so. UN Resolution 194, Article 11, which was passed and then has been passed every year since, reaffirms the right of return of all refugees to their homes, or if they don't want to return, compensatory compensation. And that's a sticking point that could be negotiated. The compensation, it could be either building people homes, it could be building homes in the style of the settlements, it could be hitting towns in Israel and relocating the citizens there to different cities. It could be a whole number of things. These are all things that can be discussed and worked out. The minutiae can be worked out by people who are smarter and more qualified than us. But the important thing is that we get the big parts, the most important things right. And in order to do that, we're going to have to ensure that the Palestinians have adequate representation. They have secondly, and most importantly, an interested partner who's actually willing to make negotiations in good faith and uphold their end of the deal.
Right.
And so far, I don't think we have that.
Yeah, let's let Ryan go ahead and share what you believe is necessary on Israel's side for realistic negotiations.
Well, I would agree with Kyle that a large part of it is going to be finding somebody that's a worthwhile leader for the Palestinians. That they've never had that. They've never had a leader who actually puts the people ahead of himself. I think that's going to be a large part of it. Now, where I tend to disagree a little bit with Kyle here is what I would find to be the most important things. Now, the important thing to me would be getting the Palestinian people an actual place to live, like an actual state, not just a state that basically is what they're told is a state. Now, we're gonna take his example, and he talked of a single state solution. Now, I don't believe that would be viable simply because there's no upside there for an Israeli. Now, Israeli people are Jewish in the main. I mean, there are Christians and Arab Israelis, and there's Muslim Israelis, but let's be honest. At this point, Jewish state, it's the Jewish homeland, and I don't think they're interested in giving that up. So, to me, a large part of it would be keeping Israel Jewish. That's where the priority.
That's an interesting analogy I like to use is even if you get away, if you rob a bank You don't get to keep that money when you finally do get caught. Just because
But
you
they
got
didn't
out of
steal
the
anything,
building.
Kyle.
Yes, they did. Of course they did. That's not up for discussion. It is a
That's totally up for
verified
discussion. They were
fact.
given it by
It
the
is a
British.
verified fact that the British. It wasn't the British to give away. The British were administering the land. They didn't own it. And this is a sticking point that I don't think we're going to agree on. This is just. I don't think this is. I think this is a sticking point we're just never going to get anywhere on, because you're not interested in the historical reality of it. You're
The historical reality is that they didn't steal it.
You're interested in revisionist history that wipes the Zionist. You're interested in revisionist history that paints
So
the
let's talk about that then. So revisionist history means that the British weren't the dominant power. The British were not the dominant power in the Middle East, so they had no right to give away the land. That's your assertion, correct?
No, the assertion is that for the administrators, they were not the owners of land. They were just occupiers, just like anybody else. Doesn't make it theirs.
But then, unfortunately, like the creation of the rest of the entire world, history of the world, you're saying that there's no way that nations have never been created through violence or oppression.
Not since the
I would argue that
establishment
every
of
single nation in the
international
history
law.
of the world was created like that.
Not since the advent of international law. That it's illegal to acquire land through war.
So is Pakistan illegal?
I'm not talking about Pakistan or India. I'm talking about.
Well, I know we're not talking about Pakistan. Heaven forbid we talk about anybody else, because only was ever bad.
Well, this is
That's my entire
the banner at the top. It says Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
My entire point.
About other
My
things
entire point. Yeah, but the problem is, Kyle, you only want to discuss other things in international law when it suits your point. My point is very simple. My point is that Israel was created in a certain manner. Pakistan was created in the exact same manner. Yet we're sitting here talking about a conflict where 50,000 people have died since 1948.
Right.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Kyle, do you have a direct point off of that? And I want to welcome in Jehad.
We're also talking about a conflict.
Right.
Yes, off of that. We're talking about a conflict where 50,000 people have died. I'm not sure where you got that figure. I don't know if it's accurate or not.
It's accurate.
For the sake of argument, let's assume that it is. That's also not really the point. I don't believe the Pakistanis have a powerful lobby that influences American policy in its favor. I don't believe the Pakistanis have a lobby that ensures that American politicians keep the gravy train of free money flowing. And I'm fairly certain the Pakistanis don't have a lobby that ensures that the U.S. uses its veto power at the UN Security Council in defiance of the entire world.
You're not arguing my point, Kyle. You're arguing the argument you want to make. You're not arguing what I said. What I said is, why are we discussing
what you said is a red herring.
Another country with the exact same thing.
Well, your entire argument is a red herring. That's not the point. I'm not concerned with Pakistan right now. That's not what we're discussing.
Right. So
that's my entire point, Kyle, is that you people much prefer to talk about Israel to the exclusion of everything. And then you say we're changing the point. We're not changing the point. What I'm saying is we're applying your logic. Why don't we ever see huge, UN Resolution 253 against Pakistan for occupying Balochistan? We don't see stuff like that. And I'm curious why you think that might be. Why is it that it's such a conflict that literally, when you look at the actual statistics, the conflict does not merit the attention it gets? And yet, here we are.
Maybe not in terms of human collateral, but in all reality, it is one of the most impassioned and not to mention the longest ongoing military occupation since ever. Since
1950 to now? That's not really that long.
1948 to 2012.
That's if you argue Israel is occupying Palestine. Argue that it's not.
Whoever just joined the room, can you please?
Would be arguing incorrectly.
Whoever just joined the room, can you click exit Vonvo, please? I'm going to assume that it's Rashid because he continues to try. Rashid, can you click exit Vonvo? You're distorting the video, and then I want to get Jehad in here. Jehad, How are you? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I'm good.
Yeah, Rashid, Jihad, how are you? Thank you for coming back. How's everything going?
Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you. Just have a question for Ryan.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I'm from Jerusalem, and from Deir Yassin. I think you ever heard of Deir Yassin.
You're from Deir
Small.
Yassin?
Yes, I'm from Deir Yassin. And I think you heard the massacre that occurred in the April 9th, 1940.
I apologize, Jihad. I can't hear you. Let me just.
If
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So,
Thank
like I told you, I'm from the city of Jerusalem, and I'm sure you heard about the massacre that happened, and I think the night of on the 9th of April of 1948,
I've read about Deir
when
Yassin, yeah.
two organizations. Yeah, do you hear me?
I hear you
Yeah,
fine.
I hear you. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
Continue.
so what do you say about that? What I mean, the whole world heard about this massacre. Over 90%, 100% killed in probably 3 4 hours. So can you tell me
Numbers I
something
had
about
actually
how you feel
125.
about that? Think about this
Terrible.
massacre.
Absolutely terrible. That's something that never should have happened. And I do not support the attacks on civilians. Unfortunately, and this is the thing, Jihad, I want you to understand. I would never support an attack. Oh, sorry, something's going strange there. I would never support an attack on civilians. And I do understand, obviously, that there were massacres definitely on both sides. That doesn't marginalize what happened to the people of Deir Yassin. It's still wrong, and it still needs to be acknowledged. But like I said, unfortunately, those sorts of things do happen throughout history.
Okay,
That doesn't
but
make it right.
the consequences that happen after that night, that make most people leave their homes and run away. I mean, these consequences that you should take into consideration. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people just left their houses because they heard what happened in Deir Yassin. Actually, that the next day they start moving from their villages, and Israel actually they plan. I mean, let, let me say the Jews. Okay, they know that it's gonna happen, and they spread rumors that we will come to every village and we will do the same thing to every village, which is they did after that too. So
Well, I wouldn't say they did that at every village, but there were definitely excesses during the War of Independence, that's for sure.
yeah,
Well,
they
this was
did for
before
a
the
couple
War of
villages
Independence.
after Deir Yassin.
Yeah, no, and don't get me wrong, there were definitely excesses, like I said. I mean, the unfortunate part of that region is if you really go back almost every 5 years and see that there was a massacre on one side or the other. It's just the unfortunate part when you have two peoples that really don't know each other very much in close proximity. I mean, you can go back to the massacre in Hebron in 1929. You can go back farther than that and find another massacre of Arabs by Jews. You can find more by Jews by Arabs. That's just the nature of the East.
Yeah, but
Ryan,
the
I
whole
think-
idea about
Go ahead,
the
Jim.
state of Israel just been established upon another people. I mean, we have our houses there, we have our furniture, we have our land, and they just came and occupied everything. Our chairs that we used to sit on, our cabinets. They even took our bedrooms. They lived in the same bedrooms that we used to live. Some of them they didn't buy no new bedrooms. They just took our bedrooms, and some of them they used our kitchen where stuff like that.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely what happened there.
What kind of people are they?
What kind of people are there? They're people that were returned to their homeland. It's
That's not the
unfortunate.
homeland, though.
What homeland? What homeland?
Israel.
And this, I need you to explain that to me, please. because I
Sure.
cannot understand what homeland you're talking about. If my father and my grandfather and my
Yep.
grandfather, and I could name like 9 generation, 10 generation, 12 generation,
Yep.
because I know my culture, and I know my history, and I know
Yep.
who lived in
And
my
I have no
land.
doubt you do.
Okay, just let me finish this. Okay, they lived there. Okay, so all of the sudden you come and you tell me this is not your land. What happened to the hundred of years that I've been there, living there? And you came from Poland, and you came from Russia with the blue eyes, and you said we've been here for no. Your skin is not like this soil. This soil, I've been in this. I lived in that soil, okay, and my father and his father, 4 generations, okay, and we plant the olive trees there for hundreds of years. Where have you been? Where have you been? You've been in Poland. What you was doing in Poland for all this years? And all
Jihad,
of
do
a
you
sudden
study
you
history?
came. Yeah, I studied some.
You study some history? You know
Well,
what the Romans
you
did?
know, let me tell you something about history. I want to
We're-
tell you something. Just let me tell you something about history.
Sure.
When I was gonna study history, the Israel government changed actually my history. They put another history in the books that I was studying in school, and they told me this is your history. This is how intelligence in Israel was bad. They changed my history, and they put what they want. You can't even. I mean, if you go like 15 to the back, you can't Palestine word in my books, in the school books. They change it.
Jihad,
What history are you talking about?
Jihad, can we let
The
Ryan
history I start.
can we let Ryan respond, Jihad?
Yeah, go.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that your family was there for a long time. Obviously, you said you can trace it back several generations. I do take issue with the fact, though, that you say that all the Jews came from Poland or Russia. That's not how it was. There were several Jews. There are lots of Sabras that live in Israel, but there are several Jews that can trace their lineage back, and they can trace their lineage back a long way. Now, if you look at history, you'd know that Rome came in and basically dispersed them. They were the original displaced people. They basically came in, destroyed the entire country, and like you just said, they actually tried to change history. They changed the name of the region from what it was to Palestina. And the reason they did that, if you go back and read the history books, was actually the emperor at the time said, who is the Jews' greatest enemy? From the Philistines. So he immediately said, from henceforth, it will be known as Philistina. Now, that's history. That goes way back. Now, I never argue, and I will never argue. You'll never hear me argue that Israel is legitimate strictly because of the historical ties to the land. That's not why Israel is legitimate to me. Israel is legitimate to me because it was founded by the British as a homeland for the Israelis. Now, when you look at the small strip of land,
who are the Jewish to decide? I mean, you keep saying the Jewish. Who the Britain? I mean, you said something about England and Britain. Yeah. Who are Britain and England to decide my future and my land? Who are they? You keep saying because they gave me. You said because they gave me the land. Who are they?
Okay, so the easiest way for me to explain it, and this is coming from somebody whose country was appropriated by the exact same type of imperialism, is the way history has always worked is that the most powerful people, they have the control. It's the way it is. We can argue the validity of it, we can argue the legalities of it. We cannot argue the facts, and that's our. The British took the region away from the Ottomans. The Ottomans took it away from whoever they took it away from. But the bottom line is, if I'm in charge, I make the decisions. And at the time, the British were in charge. The British made the decision to start the Palestinian Mandate and resettle the Jews there. Now, I don't think it was right the way that it happened, but it happened.
So you mean?
There's no arguing whether or not.
So Jihad, do you understand where?
So you mean if? Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay, go ahead.
So you mean if a powerful country, you mean the right of the powerful country to decide the life of other people, like because England was so powerful, they have the right to decide. So the Muslims actually, if they become a powerful country, they have to decide something about the Jews in future.
That's pretty much the way it works. Now,
Powerful.
I wouldn't argue, yeah, Jihad. I wouldn't argue that it's their right. I would argue that it's the ability. There's a big difference here, because I think sometimes people think that I'm justifying imperialism or justifying colonialism. That's not the case. What I'm saying is that that's how it happens. It has nothing to do with rights. It has everything to do with the.
But at the end, we are justifying things about the rights, about your right, about my right to live, his right to live, his right to be a citizen, his right. So we're talking about rights here. We're not talking about power. Is that true?
Well, see, here's the thing. Right now, I mean, just the direction that this conversation has gone in, it's kind of gone in the direction where, why is Israel there? And that was, somebody had asked me, like, why do I think Israel exists? That's why Israel exists.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you could consider this my question to you. Why?
Okay. Well, to be absolutely honest, I think what happened was you had a displaced people in the Jews. They were scattered all around Europe, and nobody wanted them. Not one European country actually stepped up and said, we will allow these people to settle here. They did have a historical tie to the land, but that's not the justification for it. That was one of the reasons that the British used when they set up the mandate. Now, you already had the Zionists that were returning to the land in the 1800s. So they thought, okay, well, we've already got a sparsely populated land. We have a people that nobody wants. We'll settle them there. Now, unfortunately, and you're obviously an example of that. There obviously were people that were living on the land. That obviously wasn't the British's primary concern, right? I mean, it's not. I'm definitely not trying to marginalize you or belittle you. I'm just saying that the British concern wasn't for the Arabs that were currently living there. The British concern was for the Jewish problem, and to them, their version of the Jewish problem was where to settle these people.
Yeah, but they don't come with roses.
Let's let
the Jews. They don't come with roses and flowers to the Palestinians. Actually, they come with gun and powder, and they.
Right. So Kyle, what point did you want to state?
And they start spread hatred.
Well, the point that Ryan's making is that the British had the power. And he's saying that he's not justifying it or saying it was right or anything, but you don't need to. You're already acknowledging it doesn't mean they had the right. And just because you're in charge of something, that means you're responsible for it. And if you really want to follow that train of thought, then Israelis, they should be trained. Their population should just be transferred straight to England, or maybe one of the territories that England has. They're still one of the largest landholders in the world. Let them transfer them to tropical island somewhere. If you want a Jewish state, go ahead. But then why should the Palestinians have to suffer at their expense? Why should that come at the expense of the Palestinians?
But at this point, I know, but Kyle, my point would be that at this point, all these things that we're discussing here, I mean, it's to discuss it. It's nice to talk about what's right and stuff like that. But at this point, talking about, well, they shouldn't have done it, it's a little bit late for that. And yeah, there's always going to be a population.
It's not too late.
It's absolutely too late. 6 million Israelis aren't going anywhere.
No, it's not. It's not too late. That's not the problem at all.
What are we going to do with
6 million people
Israelis?
Can be moved.
Really?
6 million people can be moved. Countries cannot be. Countries. You do not
I'm
get
sorry,
to destroy a country and a people and then say, it happens, and not make any amends or try or even be interested. No, that's not the way the world works. And if that's the way that things happen, that's the way things happen are wrong, and it needs to change.
It might need to change, but 6 million Israelis aren't going anywhere.
Kyle, would you agree?
I have the
they
same
may not necessarily have to go anywhere.
Kyle, would you?
I have the exact same argument actually with some of my Israeli friends that want to get rid of the Palestinians.
Kyle, my question to you.
Well, of course they do, but the difference is the Palestinians belong there.
Sorry, go ahead, Max.
Kyle, what I was going to ask, just because it's gotten broadened up, I guess, sort of indirectly, and although it doesn't necessarily, it relates, but it's not directly about Israel and Palestine, is Ryan correct though, where over past history, in terms of giving up certain lands to certain individuals, the transferring of land, the idea behind like imperialism and stuff like that. I mean, can we see? Is it common knowledge? Do you agree that that does exist in many other areas of the world over the course of history, and even let's say like the past century, that's happened many times, or not really?
Well, of course, might makes right was the way that the world worked for a very long time, and it's brought us nothing but chaos and lots of very bloody wars. I mean, just look at Europe. Europe alone, a massive example of nothing but one power. One guy's got bigger guns than the other, so hey, let's use them and take them over. Napoleon tried to conquer Europe. Hitler tried to conquer Europe. It's a never-ending cycle. That's what the United Nations. That's what international law was created for, to put an end to that, so we could live as a civilized race of human beings rather than savages trying to kill each other over whose skin color is different or who worships a different god. And when you've got an intransigent party of people who blatantly international law and protections from first world countries like the U.S., you can't sit here and tell me that they're in a spoke for peace. The status quo is all they're interested in, and we can't argue that fact. They're interested in the status quo, and it's up to us to make sure that's not the case.
How do we change the status quo in terms of that idea? Anyone have any ideas that are worth actually any recent examples that you guys have seen of ways to change the status quo? Jehad, did you have anything else you wanted to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Jehad, I'd like to hear you.
Yeah, right. Thanks. Well, I feel sorry for the history of the Jews in Europe. I really do. You mentioned that the Jews been having hard time or hate, and they was looking for a place to be living together in peace and security. But actually, when they came to Palestine, they did not come with flower and roses. Palestine. They come and they spread hatred against the Arabs and Muslims. And instead of coming and instead of open colleges for these and hospitals, and instead of take care of them, and because actually Jews been very educated in Europe, a lot of them, and instead they start doing the opposite things, kill these people and displace them from their land and take everything they own. So actually, who started this is the Jews. I understand they have to look for place to live in security and peace. I don't mind. I support the idea for the Jews to live in security, but they've been living with Muslims for centuries and security and peace. Actually, they've been in Spain with in the Andalus. They've been there and they've been working with Muslims themselves and in the same government at that time. So there is no problem for the Jews to be living with Muslims, but not as the state of Israel, because I believe the state of Israel committed enough crimes against Palestinians and against the Arab as a whole. So
if I might jump in and make one comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle,
Yeah,
and then Kyle, I know you said that your battery's running low, so make your last comment if you want, please.
Well, I just wanted to state in page 637, Umar ibn al-Khattab made the following promises to the people of Jerusalem. He assured physical safety, protection of property, the freedom to maintain churches. There would be no forced conversion to and rights to existing property and the freedom to immigrate were upheld. They were inviolate.
that's so true.
So, you can argue that, but the fact of the matter is that, yes, under Islamic rule in Palestine, Jews prospered. They lived, they thrived, they had no problems. They lived their lives. They were very much, they were happy people. But the problem is not religious. The problem is not Jews versus Muslims. The problem is Zionism and colonialism versus the indigenous people and their rights. It basically boils down to property rights. If I live somewhere, you do not get to come in with guns and say, hey, my family used to live here, it's mine now. That's not how it works. If you do that, and you do successfully remove me from my home, I have the right to return.
That's what the Jews did.
Return, and no, that's not what the Jews did.
Jews exactly what the Jews did. You just described the Romans coming into the Jews' homes and kicked them out, and 1,000 years later they came home.
No, that's simply not true.
It's a matter of time.
That's simply not. That's simply false. Period.
That's history.
Kyle. No, that's not history.
That's history.
That's cherry picked history. The fact of the matter is that the Jews were the ones
history.
who came
I just used your point.
In the first place. The Jews were the ones who came in the first place and massacred the people of Canaan and the 7 tribes.
Yep.
They were the ones who
where
came
are the Canaanites?
I'm sorry?
Where are the Canaanites?
The Palestinians.
We're going to go all the way back to history. They're the indigenous people then. I mean, your whole argument predicated on being indigenous.
The Perizzites, the Hittites, the Philistines, the various other 7 tribes.
I got a question, Ryan.
They are the descendants of the Palestinians.
Ryan, I have a question.
Go ahead, Max.
I have a question for you that Greta posts, and I think it's a valid one. Why are the Palestinians paying the price for what Europe did to the Jews in World War II?
They're not. Zionism's 1800s. Greta needs to actually start reading some history books. Zionism actually began in the 1800s.
Including the ones
I don't think she has. She's one of the most ignorant people I've ever met.
No, I said, how about you suggest some history books, including the one where you state that
we can start actually
on the land.
Yep. Okay. So here's one we can start with actually because it speaks to Jehad's point. Actually, Jehad also
out in the text chat.
Just wait. Just so as Jehad stated earlier on, he said that the Jews came and they started off. They didn't bring flowers. They brought guns. But if you actually go back and read the actual interviews in the Peel Commission, now anybody here can Google Peel Commission and read the actual Peel Commission findings. The Jews actually came, they built schools, they built markets, and somebody who absolutely despised the Jews, so the Aji Khamenei, he actually stated the Jews came here and improved things. That was in the 1800s. Now that's way before World War II. That's way before any guilt over the Holocaust. So I'm sorry, but when I read something ignorant and I'm asked a question that to me is the absolute base ignorance to say something like, why are the Palestinians paying for the Holocaust? The Palestinians aren't paying for the Holocaust. The Declaration was before World War. Let's start reading some books here and educating ourselves.
Ryan, sorry to say that, but you're not honest at all. First of all, books are not you can. Go read the books for the Palestinians, okay, which I'm talking about the school books, and see how the Israel intelligence, they controlling every single word in the book, in our religion.
One of my favorite historians is Edward Said.
What schools you talking about?
Guys.
What I'm saying is that one of my favorite historians is Edward Said. He's an actual Palestinian historian.
Okay.
I also like Benny Morris. Benny Morris is what what a lot of people call the new historians. He's very, very unbiased in his writings about the early. Not somebody that's going to sit here and make up facts. I've actually educated myself on this conflict on both sides.
Okay, sounds good. But when you said they came, and they built schools and markets, they did not build this for the Palestinians. They built this for the Jews.
Built it for everybody that was there.
Okay, so they actually. Okay, how many colleges in West Bank we have? at the time of after 1967. Probably
That's
two
the thing.
colleges. Okay, two college. After the 67 until the 80, probably we have two college. Okay, they want us to be ignorant. They want us to be backward. They don't want us to be educated. Okay, so don't tell me they want us to be educated.
There's actually quite a few Arab Israelis that go to the University of Tel Aviv.
There's no such thing as an Arab Israeli. There's a Palestinian Israeli. But you also forget the University of Tel Aviv was built on the remnants of the village of Sheikh Nuanis.
Actually,
and the
Kyle,
cafe there is the last.
Whether or not they're allowed to go to school, and I just said yes, they are.
Of course, they're allowed to
now,
go to school.
I just noticed, actually, I just want to speak to this. I see that Nadia posted the Peel Commission in 1937. Yes, the Peel Commission was in 1937. They interviewed the leaders of the Palestinians at the time, and they actually they made sure that they put all those interviews into documents for people to read. Now, they actually...
Do you guys hear Ryan?
Discuss very clearly...
Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, you're just going in and out, so maybe talk a little bit slower.
Sorry about that. Okay. Long story short, I don't think... I think pretty much I'm done here. I'm getting some of the comments coming from the Peanut Gallery over here. Kyle, I do appreciate the fact that you came and had to talk about it. And Max, I definitely appreciate the way you've conducted the forum.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for your help. Kyle, thank you for joining us again today. Jehad, if you hear me, I want to say you do. Thanks so much for coming on today. And we have one more scheduled discussion at 8 o'clock tonight, Eastern Time. And then tune in tomorrow at 4 o'clock p.m. For a discussion on Syria. And if anyone else wants to jump into this room as Ryan and Kyle leave, please be my guest. And we can keep the dialogue continuing. Ryan, I'll be in touch. And Kyle, of course, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.